Yes, Sachin.
Okay, yeah,
Please go ahead.
okay.
Yes, Sachin.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. A very good evening, afternoon, morning, night to everyone who is joining from different parts of the globe. I welcome you all to the very first session, the training session that we are starting officially today. I thank you all for joining the inaugural session that we had yesterday, and we had a great discussion with all of our dignitaries from the different organizations. We had Ajay sir from ISA to give us a head start to this program, and today we'll be joined by Vikrant and Jhalak from. For the historical background on COP and how the year is looking ahead into COP 29 and what's the road for COP 29. So I'll just hand it over to Vikrant, and I'll just quickly also introduce Vikrant to all of you. Um, so Vikrant joins us from Lead for Earth, organization that he's running he's the co-founder of the Lead for Earth organization, and he has been in the space for quite some time, and he is a multidisciplinary climate action professional with tons of experience, in climate action and intergovernmental processes for climate adaptation solutions, youth leaderships, and policy governance systems. He has been to multiple COPs as well as the SBs, the subsidiary bodies meeting in the past. He was also present at the recently concluded SB60s that happened in Bonn, Germany. Um, he is working with the Youth for Earth as Lead for Earth, as I mentioned, and he has influenced a lot of policy decisions across the Asia Pacific countries. And right now, his leadership roles is securing substantial funding for grassroots level projects. He has directly benefited over 50,000 individuals and mobilized over 300,000 US dollars for the different projects on different aspects of climate. Vikrant has worked and earned the Young National Achievers Award and a gold medal at the Global Sustainable Futures Network. And he has also closely followed the Rio Convention and serves as the advisor to the World Food Forum. I welcome Vikrant, and I hand it over to you. Vikrant, the floor is all yours.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much for
much.
joining in once again.
Thank you so much, Achintya. Hope I am audible and my screen is visible too. Okay, perfect. That was quite brief of introduction. Just to add one more thing, I have been also being honored recently as a national coordinator for climate reality project. So happy to be part of the extreme organization. Welcome everyone. As Achintya has already mentioned, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are. Hope you are doing well and enjoying the sunshine. And thank you for joining this today's presentation. We will be looking forward on the history and the current status of Conference of Party, which is also known as COP, and the sustainability bodies under the UNFCCC, known as United Nations Framework of Convention on Climate Change. Today, we'll try to explore what is COP, what is SPs, and their evaluations, and further how their role is important in shaping global climate policy. I hope that we will be able to learn together on more on historical development, on how where the COP is being origin, and some of the key agreements such as Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, and so. We'll also look forward on understanding some of the key milestone, some of the important COPs meeting, some of the roles and responsibility, how it works, the triple C, COPs, SBs, and further some of the challenges, achievements, current and the future, how it looked like. And further, we'll try to also learn how to participate in the triple C and how this COP meeting look likes. And I hope by the end of this presentation, you will understand somewhat the history, role, challenges, and the achievement of the COP and SBs. And this will further help you to appreciate the complexity of the international climate negotiation and the step that is needed to take an action for sustainable future. So let's begin our journey into the world of COP and subsidiary bodies. This is me, Vikrant. You have heard a lot of from Achintya. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can follow me on LinkedIn, and I will share later again where we can have more deep dive discussion later. Okay, how many of you know what is UNFCCC? I just wanted to know how many of you know. You can share that over the chat. If you know, you can type Y. If you don't know, you can type N. So after the presentation, I will also ask the same question with you all. So I just wanted to check the difference we made after this presentation. So I will give you like a minute and so to share how many of you know. If you do know, type in the chat why. If you don't know, type in the chat no. And don't worry, we are here together to learn. So, yeah, type why if you know and type N if you don't know. Okay, let's start the journey from where it comes. And you might be seeing there are a couple of things that are on your screen. So we'll try to learn about the history of where the international climate policy formed. And to begin with the history, in 1979, the World Meteorological Organization in Geneva came together, which take place in Geneva. Just to all let you know, the WMO is a body that works around activities and service and spanning on research related to weather, climate, and water related activities. So this was the first time where the discussion started and refer as a climate change discussion. And further after that, uh, the foundation of IPCC took place. Just to all let you know, IPCC is the body that works on further reporting on climate change, and further it also assists on how it causes in impacts and further response that can be taken. So in 1988 the IPCC was formed, and in 1990 the first IPCC report came. So just after the IPCC was founded, the first IPCC report came, and in the second World Climate Conference, which was held in the UNGA, that is United Nations General Assembly, uh, people started recognizing that okay, this is a challenge. Now the IPCC has came with a report, and now we have to understand and deal with this global crisis. In 1991, the first intergovernmental negotiation committee has started. That now they have understand that this is something that is one of the challenges. Now we have to discuss on it. So in 1991, they have started discussing on it. Okay, let's have a discussion about how these things can we can tackle up. And from there, in 1992, the INC, which was set up as called International Negotiation Committee, was adopted UNFCCC text. And further in 1992, there was a Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. That's why it also called Rio Summit. It's adopted that UNFCCC was open for signature with other two sister Rio Convention. So just people, those who don't know, Rio Convention was also the mother of two different other convention. Here we will learn about UNFCCC, but other two convention was also formed during that time was CBD that works on Convention on Biological Diversity, and further UNCCT that works on combating desertification. So these three key elements are intersectionally related, and it came out of Rio Convention. And after Rio Convention, party took some time to acknowledge that this is a problem, and also took some time to ratify that we want to work on these convention, these issue. So it was date 21st March 1994 when UNFCCC officially came into the force. And further to develop and to work on addressing the problem related to climate change, the convention was agreed by more than 50 countries. and later by 2007 it is now been ratified by more than 200, 192 countries. Until now, it has been ratified by more than 197 countries. Uh, so yeah, that's a bit of a history of UNFCCC. Don't get confused about seeing all this structure. This is just to let you know how it is being worked and how it has been functional. We will learn later about the subsidiary bodies, COP, and how the observer work. But let's get into deep how the university work. In the structure, you can see the main body of UNFCCC is the secretariat. So secretarial is the one who provides support on the discussion of the global climate action. It works on organizing negotiation, providing expertise further on protocols such as Paris Agreement and Kyoto. It also works on maintaining the registries on NDCs that you might all have familiar with, and also works on co-organizing the regional climate week. The secretarial is based in Bonn, Germany from 1996, and the secretarial was also established during the 1992 establishment. The head of secretarial is known as executive secretary. Now, the current secretarial, executive secretarial is Mr. Simon Steele. He is from Grenada since 2022. Here we'll try to learn about the ad hoc working group, and further in the later part of the presentation, we'll go deep dive about what is conference of party, what are the subsidiary bodies. So ad hoc is a group on Paris Agreement that was established on 12th December 2005 to prepare of the Paris Agreement entity. And we learn about more Paris Agreement in the later part of the presentation. So further, the key responsibility of ad hoc working group is to prepare this decision of COP recommendation and its adaptation. It also works on developing guidance on mitigation aspect and further on the NDCs of it. It also works on creating guidelines for adaptation, communication, including NDCs component. Some of the ad hoc, if you if you want to know, is one of it is ad hoc working group on Durban platform for enhanced action, and further ad hoc working group on long-term cooperative action under a convention. So this is what the ad hoc means. Okay, let's go deep into the COP. So till now we have 28 COPs, and there has been a few milestones that we have also achieved. And I will discuss more deeply and briefly what are the milestones that we have achieved. So, to all let you know what is COP. COP is a supreme decision-making body of UNFCCC. It includes all the states that are party to the convention, which are total 197 parties. There are 196 country, and the European Union is 1 plus 1. The COP review the implementation of the convention and the other legal instrument that it adopts, and further it also take part in the necessary discussion to promote effective implementation. And further, one of the main tasks of COP is also included is that to review the national communication and the emission that are submitted by the parties to further assess the effectiveness of the measure taken and progress made toward the convention of it. Some of the major agreement that I have also mentioned that we will be discussing more of it is Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, and so countries can join UNFCCC by ratifying or acceding to the convention, which almost every country and nation has been part right now on the earth. So that is somehow it looks like. Further to brief more about it, some of the keystone you can see on my screen. There has been few more key milestone of COP. Just to give you a short brief, what it has taken. In 1992, we all understand that, okay, in 1992, the UNFCCC was adopted, but the first COP took place in 1995 in Berlin. This was the first time where the mandate came, which was on initial negotiation for the strongest commitment for the developed country. So for the first time when they meet, they discussed that, okay, we need a strong commitment from the developing country. And then further, in 1997, one of the most promising and strong protocol came. In 1997, COP3 in Kyoto. Kyoto is in Japan, so COP was held in Japan that time. Kyoto Protocol was set as a legal binding emission reduction uh, that should be set and target by the developed country. Kyoto Protocol at that time was signed by 150 country, and further it also applies to commit parties to bind emission reduction. So this was the one of the strong outcome and one of the key milestone of the Kyoto Protocol. And then further moving forward, we had COP13 Bali 2007, where all parties signed on a Bali roadmap. So Bali roadmap and the Bali action plan was signed during that time, and the roadmap was to set the future climate negotiation and also to acknowledge that there is a specific emission reduction target. Before Bali, there was acknowledgement of there should be a binding of emission, there should be a binding rules for developing country, but till the Bali, there was no specific target. But during that Bali time, it was very crucial that people came together, parties, they acknowledged that, okay, there should be specific target reduction based approach. So Bali action plan came and effective to implement with the UNFCCC process. It's a long action from Bali uh, till beyond 2012. They have target to assist it, and after 2012 was, and it was also the first time where all countries agreed on IPCC fourth assessment report. During 92 also, there was not all countries agreed on IPCC. There were few countries, around 50 that agreed, but this was the first time in Bali when the IPCC 4 assessment reports was agreed. And further, it adopted Bali action plan, which also is very important, that are outlined in the future of for the negotiation and on a new international climate agreement. Moving forward from the Bali, we came at COP15 in Copenhagen. It was also an important agreement where the endorsement of continuous of Kyoto Protocol was taken place, which also underlines the climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our time. And it's emphasized that a strong political will is urged to take part. So till the Copenhagen, there was no political will. There was the first time in Copenhagen where political will also came together, that okay, now we need a strong political will also to combat climate change, and with the principle of common but differential responsibility and respective capability. This was the first time where this term came in. And further, it also uh, specify how the global average temperature should look like, and it should not increase no more than 2 degree above the pre-industrial level. It also signifying the pledge on emission reduction, and the climate finance was the first time when it introduced. But though it was introduced, but it was not legal binding till now. But it was introduced during that time, so it's an important COP. COP 16. It's also very important COP. The establishment of uh, Green Climate Fund was introduced and Concus Agreement was introduced. So those who don't know, Green Climate Fund is one of the biggest climate fund. It has more than 13.9 billion of worth project going around more than 129 countries. So this was the first time where it came, and it was created with an ambition program to help low income countries, which included commitments on mitigation, adaptation, finance, and so. So these were the terms that coined during these time. And further, COP16 was also very important because at that time, establishment of adaptation committee came to promote on implementation further to enhance action on adaptation. Moving forward, we have COP18 Doha. Again, it was also an external protocol of Kyoto Protocol, where countries came together, and countries such as USA, China, Canada, uh, v- did not support it. So it was all over the news that time that okay, these developed country during that time is not supporting to these discussions. So there are a lot of high uh, information also that time was going. And after COP18, the major breakthrough came at COP21 Paris 2015. Finally, where some changes were brought. It was a time where an agreement that surpassed everything that has previously transpired. All parties, 197, agreed and accepted scientific knowledge on climate change, that there is a human induced climate change and it's a fact occurring. And we have to keep the increase of global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius, and while striving to keep it below 1.5. Adaptation of Paris Agreement is one of the land agreement aiming to limit the global emissions, and further it also enhance and work on different process, such as just to name one is Article 7, where it works on how to achieve global goal on adaptation. And further implementation, just to all let you know that implementation of Paris Agreement requires economical and social transformation based on best available science. And this is how it can achieve, and where we need support from more developed countries and together, and as a part of uh, historical and each success and disease is also meant to be an effective and increasing. So countries during Paris Agreement that also share their commitment that they will be sharing National Climate Action Plan, which also known as NDCs. And each NDCs, when they have to submit, there should be a more higher ambition compared plan. So that's how it came. And further, we have more COPs that that one of COP 22 was the time when Paris Agreement was ratified, and it takes a long process, right? Paris Agreement was introduced in 21, and then it took around a year and so to ratify by the country. But yeah, there has been more significant more COPs, such as last year COP 28 was mixed match, but yeah, it was the first time where the outcome of the first global stock take came, and also where the commitment on the loss and damage also came. So there has been uh not a significant change from the past 30 years and so, but yeah, there has few milestones, and it also share the challenges about the global politics, is also share the challenges which we have talk about the financial burden, to also talk about how the implementation can be done. So these are the some of the challenges. Moving forward, what is SBs? Okay, to simplify it, SBs are there are two SBs. First of all, first is SBSTA, that is known as Subsidiary Body of Scientific and Technology Advice, and SBI, that is known as Subsidiary Bodies of Implementation. Both together works on cross-cutting issues that touch on both the areas. SBSTA works on scientific, technical, and technology assessment, while SBI works on developing recommendation to assist on the COP. One of these two meet two yearly meeting, where generally happens one of it happens parallel the COP. And As I shared, that both works together on the cost cutting issues, and these issues also include the vulnerabilities of developing countries on climate change and response measure that discuss under the technology mechanism and advance. Further, also it's also talk about the Warsaw International Mechanism that is for the loss and damage. Yeah, so that's is SPs. Some of the quickly to give you a historical view. First, SBs met in 1995 during COP1 in Berlin, and both the bodies were established to achieve the UNFCCC's objective. Some of their roles do evolve during the time. Initially, SBs was focused on the foundational task of UNFCCC, such as setting up the reporting mechanism, reviewing the implementation of convention. But further, with the adaptation of Kyoto and since the Paris Agreement, the responsibility of SBs has been grown to support implementation of SBs, NDCs, adaptation, planning, development of transparency framework, and so. And there has been some of the uh, uh, major milestone, I will say. One is definitely is on establishment and guidelines of developing country to formulate NAP, which is called National Adaptation Plan. And also the Green Climate Fund was also operationalized during the SPs, which again, which is to support projects, program policies, and other activities in developing countries. Some of the challenges, just to know, there is challenges such as political disagreement, financial commitment, and technology transfer is also one of the big challenges. And when the financial challenges is one of the big challenges, there will be a lot of different challenges, including technology challenges. Last year, there was SB's online support to attend SB's online, but this year there was no online badges. We'll learn more about badges later, but yeah. So these are some of the financial challenges, and right now, UNFCCC is facing a lot of financial challenges. We have talked about the achievements and so, and one of the achievement is also it has worked on comprehensive framework for technology transfer, adaptation, finance, and their guidance how the global climate change work. Now we have learned what is COP, what is ad hoc body, and what is SPs in the UNFCCC framework, and how they have evolved during these time. One of the most important body is observer, and they are called observer because they are observer, so they can observe it what is happening, and they can provide inputs in context to concentration, context to uh, their interventions. They can't uh, do the edits on the draft that is there. They can provide input, they can do the implementation. So these are the observer. And in the beginning also, you can see I have kept observer. uh, I have not linked the observer to the conference of party, because there is a reason. UNFCCC is a party driven process. It's when we say party driven process, it is actually a party driven process. But how to include other people, those who are not from the party? UNFCCC has 9 different constituency to include all other peoples, such as bingo people, those who are from the business, those who have expertise on business, people those who are from the researcher, they have ringo, people from pharma, they have pharma group, and further they have we have women and gender, indigenous people, and environment. I have kept one one column as red because it's known as children and youth youngo, which bring the voice from the children and youth in the UNFCCC process. So all these 9 constituency are the mechanism of UNFCCC that brings voices and to further enhance their engagement in these UNFCCC process. So they are known as the constituency of UNFCCC, but they have the observer status. So yeah. Now, we have learned a lot of things. Now we wanted to understand how we can participate. That is one of the most important question, that how I can participate in these discussion, whether it's COP, whether it's SPs, and whether it's any other UNFCCC event. Each COP is divided in two different zones. One is green and one is blue zone. All the discussion takes place in the blue zone in terms of negotiation, in terms of different associated event by the UNFCCC. To attend these event, you can see there are 6 different batch, and every batch represent different thing. You can see pink batch, that's called national delegation. People, those who are officially endorsed by their country, they goes on the party badge. Then you can see party head. Suppose there is a minister XYZ who is going to attend. He could be one of the party head. From party, whenever I say party, it means the country. So party is that, for example, current party head could be Mr. Bhupender Yadav, who is also our environment and forest climate change. But he could also assign to someone else as a party head when he is not at that moment. And then we have an observer badge. We have study what observer is. We have, for observer we have yellow badge, and all different badge has different role to play and different accessibility also during these process. To give you an difference, between the pink badge and the yellow badge in the UNFCCC process. Pink badge represent the official delegation, and it allow you to access the negotiation and the meeting, and also to take part in drafting. While the yellow badge, you can attend and participate in the side event, but it has limited access in the negotiation flow. So these are the two difference in the batches. There is also a green badge, and I think rest all the badge you might already understand. Blue badge is for the secretarial, those who are from the secretarial of UNFCCC, such as UN agencies, technical support people, those who are on the ground. And so then we have press badge for the media, and then we have other one badge is called green badge. And this green badge represent the IGO, the intergovernmental organization, that is entity which is created by involving two or more nations. To name one, there is an Asian Development Bank, which is also an intergovernmental body. There is a European Commission, that is also a European development body. Now, where we are right now, to give you an quick brief of it, and have just try to couple few of the things, and later you will learn more about how to take part in and what are the initial thoughts right now that are occurring and how the COP will look like. But just to give you a brief about the UNFCCC right now, where we are standing, it's been divided. You can also see there is a developed country and then there is a developing country. And starting with the just transaction, while in the just transaction, developed country want on creating more jobs in the clean energy sector during the transition away of the fossil fuel, while the developing country also wanted them to acknowledge the social justice at the same time, and also environmental sustainability, which talk about the broader view, which the developed country has been not taking. Adaptation. For the adaptation, there there is being called by the developed country that the there should be a funding to a core matrix as success to a financial, which is also crucial for the implementation and for the development adaptation strategy. While while the developing but sorry, the developing country is saying there should be a funding to a core matrix, and the developed country are saying there should be a specific financial target that are avoided, focusing on equity, shared responsibility for adaptation. Mitigation. On mitigation, developed countries talking about the MWP, which is also called Mitigation, Ambition, and Implementation Work Program. The focus here was it should address the global stocktake call. Developed country was talking about that it should reflect the stocktake, while the developing country was sharing that there should be new target on these on these implementation plan. Climate finance. Most of you know, if you don't know, that this year is a finance year, and it is very crucial to take part in the discussion that is happening on the climate on the finance. While the developed country are talking about that there should be a better approach that includes private sector investment, expanding the donor base to include the wealthy developing country. So they are focusing on discussion that there should not be a push only on developed country, but there should also be pushed on the wealthy developing country. And they also resist on some specific financial target. While till now, you all might have heard that there should be 100 billion target XYZ and so. But this was the first time during SBs that all developing country in came together, and at one voice they said that, oh, we don't want 100 billion now, we want trillions of dollar annually, with focus on public funds from developed nation and addressing climate debt. And they want it to establish after 2015. So we still have to see how it takes place. Now we have came to an ending how this year looked like. Moving forward, despite there has been limited progress on SPs and previous COP, this year COP remains a challenge, and it is a pressing challenge because COP29 Azerbaijan is a significant fossil fuel producer, present both which also present both challenges for them and also an opportunity. Definitely this year the key goal will be including securing a new financial global finance target and further enhancing international cooperation. While this year SBs underscores that there should be a necessity of addressing the climate finance and advancing tech, technical discussion and bringing the financial gap between the developed and the countries and developing countries will be crucial for COP29 success. Further, while and I will share this very strongly that we need a strong leadership, increased ambition, and a commitment to a just transition is essential for a sustainable future. Thank you. I hope that was not too technical. Over to you, Achinte.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vikrant, very much. And I guess we had a very insightful session from you and understanding what UNFCCC means, what is COP, how it has evolved over the years, what is SBs, how you can participate. So these are very vital and crucial questions that a lot of people and youngsters specifically have, in regard to their excitement and enthusiasm to take part in the policy negotiation process. And I guess I feel that a lot of the questions were answered today. And just to mention some of the key points that Vikrant already mentioned about the Kyoto Protocol. I mean, just summarizing the major points from his presentation was probably COP3, where the Kyoto Protocol, that happened in 1997, and then coming to COP21, where the Paris Agreement happened, which happened in 2015. And it took almost, this is also something, I mean, a quite interesting fact, it almost took one entire year, I guess not even 1 year, more than 1 year, to actually bring the Paris Agreement into existence. So I mean, just imagine how difficult of a process it is and how complex of a process it is. So it seems very easy, sitting down and seeing a presentation and how the COP has evolved, and just blaming the parties. I mean, I do understand that, but at the same time, it's quite complex and takes a lot of time. So just a heads up there. And last year with COP28, the UAE consensus that came out, and also we talked about the loss and damage fund, although Vikrant mentioned in his last words that we need trillions of dollars, and it actually is needed. And now we are just looking at millions of dollars just being given, and with no proper plans how to execute. And we need much more like solid and concrete climate actions, and bring in a lot more funds to actually help in the process. And of course, moving on to COP 30, we are looking at COP, which will be mainstreaming the youth and bringing the youth in the limelight. So I guess that Jhalak will maybe probably emphasize on that, and how we can kind of participate much more and contribute as a youth community, especially from the global south, and raise our voices. um, and I guess now I'll just pass it on to Jhalak, and let her do the talking, because she has much more experience with the COP processes. I'll also quickly introduce Jhalak. She's currently a program associate at the Council of Energy, Environment and Water, and she focuses. I mean, her research focuses on the Paris Agreement negotiations and the post 2020 ambitions. Developing indicators and conducting assessments on the capacity building assessment matrix, based on the modalities and procedures and the guidelines associated with the transparency of the framework. She prior to joining the council, she was working with Aga Khan Rural Support Program for the government of India's Jal Jeevan mission. She was working mostly on the grassroots level, with the challenges of the in the implementation of the scheme in Gujarat. Um, she has also been a part of the development center at the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, with their flagship report on perspectives on global development in 2021. Um, I'm quite not very good with giving introductions, but Jhalak, I give it to you. The stage is all yours. Take us through this year's expectations, and what lies ahead of the UNFCCC processes. All over to you, and thank you for being a part of this program.
Yes, thank you so much, Achintya. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And hello to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on a Sunday. This really shows the commitment that you are here on a Sunday trying to learn about the negotiations and climate diplomacy. So I'll just take a moment and share my screen. Just a moment. Yeah, I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Just one moment, sorry. Yeah. So thank you everyone. Thank you so much for joining in everyone. And thanks Achintya. Also, thank you, Vikrant. You gave me a great segue to actually talk about what happened at COP28 and what are some of the expectations. So basically, what my plan for this presentation is to use this time to specifically deep dive into some of the outcomes for COP28 for some of the specific topics. There were multiple things that were under discussion, but I will be focusing only on the or 3 to 4 key aspects. These can be fairly technical, but I have tried to keep them as simple as possible and only discuss the broader concepts without deep diving the technicality of it. So my larger objective is to provide a bird's eye view of what happened at COP28 and the expectations that we all can have from COP29 in Baku. So as Achintya also mentioned, I work with an organization called CEEW, which is the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. We use data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach to impact sustainable development at scale. The kind of research that we take looks at economy-wide transformations and also focus on quality of life and using some key catalysts and enablers such as finance, technology, and cooperation. Yes. So while Vikrant has already mentioned about what is COP, I will just take a quick refresher on this one. And this is going to be a very interactive presentation and with a lot of cartoons and everything. So this is one cartoon. It's called the Water on Earth series. This is a sustainability cartoon series that we as an organization have developed. And we all are here for one reason. So there can be very critical concepts that might be a little technical to understand, but the aim with these cartoons is to make those concepts very easy to grasp in simple languages and words. So COP is basically, as Vikrant also mentioned, the supreme decision-making body where different states that are parties to the convention come at COP and are represented. UNFCCC currently has 197 parties, and all these parties conduct formal negotiations among themselves on critical issues that are related to climate change, and largely also promote the implementation of the key decisions and under the convention every year. Also, under the COP, the body also reviews some of the country submissions, specifically the national communications, which largely talk about the country level actions, what kind of priorities they have, what kind of actions they have taken, what are the different measures, and also their emission inventories that talk about where the emissions are the highest under different thematic categories, and assess the larger measures and progress made under this. So here's a quick question for everyone. And I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself, but it'll be great to have some answers in the chat. How many people do you think were a part of COP28? How many people participated? Maybe you can just take 10 seconds and have some answers.
The chat box is available for inputs.
Yeah. I can't see. I'm not sure if there's some answers that are coming in.
It's in the Q&A chat box, Jhalak, if you could
Okay.
just...
All right. So the answer, actually, there were more than 85,000 people who actually participated at COP28. The reason why I put this question over here, because this was an incremental and massive increase from last year. At COP27, we saw there were approximately 35,000 people, including the head of states, different observers that became a part. But at COP28, there were around 85,000 people, making it one of the largest COPs ever. So, yeah. One last question before we move into this. Which country do you think had the highest registered delegation at COP28? Was it India, Brazil, Afghanistan, or none of them? If you could have some answers, guys. Yes, the answer is actually Brazil, and this was largely because COP30 is going to be conducted in Brazil, in Belém. So they have been elected as the host country, and they had one of the largest delegations after the UAE that had come in. So while Vikrant has already mentioned about the history and the evolution of different COPs, I'll just very quickly take you through some of the other key COPs. There have been 28 COPs so far. And over the past year, this as a global platform has played a crucial role in addressing and discussing some of the critical climate related issues. And this makes it important for us to understand like what are some of the key milestones and the history. So the first key summit was the Rio Summit in Brazil in 1992. And this was a landmark event basically because the UNFCCC was established, paving the way for different and subsequent conferences to address the climate crisis. The primary objective of this one was to bring together different nations and majorly foster collaboration to mitigate the impacts of climate change and adapt to these consequences. We also had the Kyoto Protocol that has already been spoken about, so I'll move to the next one. We had the Copenhagen Accord in Denmark in 2009. Now, this was critical from the perspectives of finance. This was the first time that the developed nations committed to mobilize $100 billion dollars per year for the developing countries. And this is a key goal that we will be talking about in detail in the coming slides. We also had the COP21 in Paris, which is famously known as the Paris Agreement. And this was also a landmark pact which had an aim to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius and pursue efforts towards 1.5. And this was also a critical COP for two reasons. One, because it was guided it was grounded and guided by science. And second, like the Kyoto Protocol and Doha Amendment, this was more of a voluntary agreement and followed a top-down approach where countries actually came themselves and suggested their emission reduction targets in form of NDCs. We also have COP26 in Glasgow, which was another important COP, and this was held after 2 years of lockdown. And this became critical because the Paris Agreement rule book, which basically talks about the transparency arrangements on how countries can report, was actually finalized. COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh was also an important one and saw one big win in terms of the loss and damage fund. So in 2022, this fund was established, and this was a big ask and a long-standing ask from the small island states, from the vulnerable nations, to be compensated for the impacts that they are facing due to climate-related disasters. And lastly, we had last year's COP28 in Dubai, where there were two key decisions that were made. The first one was to operationalize the loss and damage fund. While it was established in 2022, it was operationalized in 2023. And this became a historic COP in a way, because this was the first time that a decision on the first day of COP was adopted. And secondly, we had the first global stocktake, which I will be talking about in detail. So just to take you through an overview of COP28, there were multiple focus areas that were under consideration. This is just a suggestive list and not an exhaustive list. There are other key aspects such as just transition, mitigation, that have not been covered. So there were some of the key focus areas, one which is a global stocktake, where we had to review the progress of all countries collectively to assess their progress towards Paris Agreement goals. We also had the loss and damage fund and the operationalization of it. How do we enhance more finance, and how do we enhance accessibility and mobilization of the same? Under adaptation, there was discussion about the framework that was being discussed, and how can we better track adaptation efforts and have more finance dedicated to the same. Energy transition was also a critical aspect, where we're looking at how do we enhance, how do we move to a cleaner future, such as tripling, and look at targets such as tripling the RE targets and everything. In terms of food systems, also became an important topic, where how do we make the food that we eat and grow more sustainable. And cooling was also an important topic, not as a negotiation item, but on the sidelines, where a cooling pledge was also announced. So here is a small quiz where I would say, so for every thematic category that I'm looking at, this is a small quiz. And I would like for you to decipher and just tell me what that topic would be. So if I can have some answers, so this is, I happen every 5 years, a gathering so grand, where nations unite to assess where they stand. At COP28's end, my first chapter closed, a crucial review the world undergoes. Any thoughts any thoughts on what this could be? Here's a small hint as well, and this, I could not make it any more easier than this. Yeah, so it is actually the global stocktake. So I'll just take a few minutes and just share about what exactly is the global stocktake. So the global stocktake was established under the Article 14 of the Paris Agreement, and it lies at the heart of it and is a very important component. The objective of this is to periodically take stock of the implementation of the different efforts and goals to achieve the long-term temperature goals under the Paris Agreement. To put it another way, it is expected the countries to help course correct, which is basically align with the science, set more ambitious goal for their NDCs, basically set higher emission reduction targets, and also enhance international cooperation. Now, this was a critical moment because this was the first global stocktake that was happening of the Paris Agreement, and this presented an opportunity to increase the climate ambition to put the world on the right path. It was actually guided by three key principles, which were equity, science, and inclusivity. In terms of equity, it was basically the idea was to undertake and acknowledge the importance of differentiation, which was basically how developed countries have been historical emitters, and this should be acknowledged. In terms of science, how do we ensure that we are aligned with the 1.5 and the 2 degrees target? And in terms of inclusivity, how do we ensure that we have more stakeholders take a part in it? So as Vikrant had mentioned in his presentation earlier, that the negotiations are a party-driven process, but the global stocktake was a participatory process where different stakeholders, such as civil society organization like ours, the private sector, everybody like the indigenous groups, they could submit their submissions as well. There were three key themes that are largely discussed. The first being mitigation, which is emission reduction. Adaptation, loss and damage was also been spoken about a lot. And lastly, we had the means of implementation, which basically consists of three key aspects, which is finance, technology, and capacity building. So there were three phases to the global stocktake process, and this was a 2-year-long process that actually began in COP26 and will take place every 5 years. So the first phase was the information collection phase, where the inputs from different thematic bodies, the secretariat, the parties, different non-party stakeholders were collected on guiding questions on what they think should be some of the key messages. This actually began in COP26 in 2021. The second phase was a technical assessment phase, and the larger objective of this was to have thematic dialogues and in-person dialogues on what could be some of the key messages that could be driven, and what are some of the inputs that could be considered for the larger global stocktake summary report. And lastly was the political consideration phase, which was the most important phase, where all this information that was collected, that was discussed, was considered on what was some of the larger and key messages that we would like the global stocktake to deliver. And this is what was concluded at COP28. So in terms of what were some of the larger key messages, one of the key, in terms of what were some of the key messages, the first one was an explicit focus on limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. Now, this was an important message, because whenever we used to talk about a Paris Agreement, the focus largely used to be on 2 degrees, on limiting temperature rise to 2 degrees. But if you look at the current climate realities, if you look at the warming of the environment, the global stocktake emphasized that the target that we should focus on is 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that was an important message that came out of it. The second was that differentiation basically was also found space in the decision text, and this basically said that the developed countries, in light of the historical responsibility, should take rapid, sustained, and immediate actions to ensure that developing countries also have the space to grow. The third key aspect was actually on fossil fuels. And if you just go a little bit back on the debate of fossil fuels, this started back in COP26 in 2021, when there was the first time a decision on fossil fuels, particularly coal, was taken to phase down the unabated fossil fuel power. Building up on that, India particularly in COP27 made a call that we should be phasing down all fossil fuels, and this garnered great support. And when I talk about all fossil fuels, this includes oil, natural gas, and coal. And building on this momentum, the expectation from COP28 was that the decision would also focus on phasing down of all fossil fuels. However, it gave a very weak form of intention and weak form, which only suggests that we should transition away from all fossil fuels. So this was even weaker than phasing down of the fossil fuels. There was also references made to the role of transitional fuels that is in terms of gas. Now, gas is something which is used a lot by the West, and it could be seen as a cryptic reference basically to see that the transitional fuels could also be important for a low carbon future. And lastly, the gaps in climate finance was also highlighted in multiple aspects. So if I would conclude in what the global stocktake would look like, we can very clearly say that it did send a signal to transition away by the fossil fuels and also highlighted the importance of science. But the guidance to achieve the recommendations that were there was lacking. And one big thing that was lacking was also the obligatory role of the developed countries. The obligation should have been harder, and it just felt that it was a mere announcement of challenges rather than very targeted or actionable recommendations to achieve those targets. So moving on to the next topic, this it'll be great to have some answers. So I am a global commitment not quite met. More is needed now, you can bet. Funds are needed to set things right. For climate action to take its stance, a new deal is our chance. So what do you think this is? And Vikrant had actually also spoken about this. So I'm not sure if somebody has, okay, great. So yeah, so our next topic is actually climate finance. And when we talk about climate action, the one key enabler that we need is money. And this issue has popped up in negotiations across all different aspects, whether we talk about mitigation, whether we talk about adaptation, technology, just transition. And there is one unanimous stand that the support that the developing countries have access to is very inadequate. It is not in the best form and it is very untimely. And we keep talking about climate finance, but it is important to understand that why is it so important, especially for the developing countries. Now, developing countries are already facing economically development challenges and also the climate crisis. So, but what they have is limited resources to mitigate such impacts and transition toward such economies. So, it is important that the developed countries who have already peaked, who have already grown, that they contribute to their low carbon journey, keeping in mind with the fact that climate change is evolving and only increasing. So if you talk about what is climate finance, if you go by the UNFCCC definition, it says that the local, national, or transnational financing that supports the different actions to address climate change is what is called climate finance. And we have spoken a lot about quantum, and we have I'm sure everybody knows that how important finance is to address climate action. These are some of the numbers estimated globally by different organizations about the quantum and the kind of money that is required. For example, UNEP highlights that developing countries would need approximately 387 billions per year only for adaptation priorities. The Climate Policy Initiative highlighted that developing countries would need approximately 9 trillions annually by 2030. Uh, One of the numbers that CEEW came up with was that India would need around 10 trillions for its net zero transition. So if you look at these numbers, these are very high costs that must be addressed into these negotiations. So if I talk about the outcomes that came about from COP28, the one of the key issues was the delivery delivery of the committed 100 billion. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, this goal was decided in 2009, and this delivery was supposed to happen till 2020. However, and this 100 billion was annually. However, the countries have not been able to meet this target, and there is a huge gap. So there was a lot of discussion around the same. The second was that there is no common definition of what is climate finance. So there have been discussions happening from the past 30 years, but there is no universally accepted definition of what is climate finance. And this is very important to understand, to truly understand how much climate finance is flowing. Currently, we have multiple jargons. We have something called transition finance, we have green finance, we have climate finance, we have sustainable finance. So how do we differentiate between all of these is also very critical. The third thing was also, and which is also a very big priority for at COP29 this year, is defining the new collective quantified climate finance goal. Now, the idea was that in 2015, it was decided that the developed countries would continue their existing collective mobilization through 2025. But before 2025, this new goal will have to be decided that will supersede the 100 billion target. And this 100 billion target should take in this new goal should take into account what are the needs and the priorities of the developing countries currently. So this is a key ask from COP29 this year. And lastly, there was large discussion about increasing the ambition of the kind of money that is being delivered and also reflect the needs of the developing countries. So largely, this was majorly about finance. And I have now the third and the final topic that I would like to discuss. This is the third one. So, and I did speak about it in my initial slides. So COP28 marked a significant moment. A fund operational pact was born to compensate nations for disasters, a change so grand. What am I? A lending hand. So what do you think, guys? What do you think this would be? Yeah. So this is actually the loss and damage fund, and I'm sure a lot of you must have heard about what is loss and damage. This has become a hot topic in the last 3-4 years, but the discussions on loss and damage has been happening since 30 years, since 1991. It was in 1991 that the a small island group actually came up and said that we are very vulnerable to sea level rise, and we would like to be compensated for such, considering that we have very limited resources. And this is where the debate for loss and damage began. However, it was in 2022 at COP27 that there was some real action that was taken. So just taking a step back and looking at what was loss and damage. Loss and damage is an extension of adaptation, basically. So it refers to what are those unavoidable and irreversible impacts of climate change. There are two types of loss and damages. The first is economic damages, which basically we can put a number to it, such as loss, number of deaths, the economic productivity, loss of infrastructure. The second is basically talks about non-economic losses, which basically do not have that cannot be quantified, but are also equally important losses, such as loss of ecosystems completely, or loss of communities, traditional knowledge, or cultural identity. And loss and damage is actually increasing massively, both in terms of intensity and frequency. Currently, we have like 3.3 billion people who are vulnerable to climate change. In terms of the finance needs, some of the research papers have suggested that developing countries need approximately 400 billions per year only for loss and damage. Also, 1/5 of the vulnerable to 20 economies, which are the least economy nations, 1/5 of their wealth has been eliminated due to the climate change. And 85, if we talk about domestically, 85% of the Indian districts are actually extreme climate hotspots. And we are witnessing we are seeing that we witnessed the heat wave, we saw the floods. So this is actually increasing manifolds. So if we talk about this, in terms of the outcomes that came at the outcome for loss and damage that came at, it was a key focus. The key focus was on the operationalization of the fund. However, while the fund was operationalized, there was no fixed target that was announced, or there was no scale of contribution that was decided. There were some contributions that came in for this fund, such as UAE and Germany pledged 100 millions each. US pledged 17.5 million. But this was actually just accounted to only less than 1% of the developing countries' actual needs for loss and damage. So there was no fixed target. Those contributions were voluntary. And the World Bank has been selected as the host host for the fund. But there were there were concerns and issues that persisted, such as now the business model of the World Bank is to give more loans. But the loss and damage that is being incurred is in these poorer nations, which do not have that many resources to actually deliver on this debt. So the kind of form that these nations need is more in terms of grants and unconditional cash transfers. So it was really looked down upon that the World Bank, I mean, not particularly looked down upon, but it was a point of contention where many developing countries were not very happy with this decision, but gave into it so that this fund is operationalized. So while this is what happened, happened in terms of the negotiations for three key topics, just to shed a little bit light on how India participated at COP. India was a part of multiple high-level events and launched two key initiatives. The first one was this green credit program, which is basically a market-based mechanism to incentivize green actions, or what we call the pro-planet actions, through different sectors. And these different diverse sectors and stakeholders include like individuals, the communities, industries, the private sector. They also launched with Sweden the Lead IT 2.0, which basically focuses on an industry transition and offering and creating that space and platform for support. India also highlighted the climate financing needs for developing countries and stated its importance basically to deliver on the goals that we have decided. And lastly, and very importantly, India also proposed to host COP23 in 2028. So just to put this in perspective, this would be the year when the second global stocktake would happen, and India has proposed to host this one. So this is actually my last slide where I would be talking about basically what were some of the key highlights from Bonn conference and some of the expectations from COP29. So while Vikrant has already mentioned about what the Bonn conference is, I'll just quickly, in the interest of time, deep dive into what were some of the key highlights. So under climate finance, there were a lot of disagreements in terms of how much should the new goal should look like and who should pay for it. So in terms of who should pay, in terms of basically how much should be paid, there were different proposed targets, such as 1.1 trillion, or some countries suggested that it should be at least 1% of the GDP of developed economies, or it should be a mix of qualitative and quantitative elements. But there was no decision that came about in terms of what this goal would look like in terms of the quantity that truly reflects the needs of the developing countries and is also agreeable by the developed countries. And in terms of the time frame, there were multiple options that were discussed, such as a short-term 5-year time plan, a 10-year framework, and an aspirational long-term goal with shorter interim targets. And in terms of who should pay, there was a consistent divergence between developed and developing countries, where the developed nations wanted emerging economies such as China, such as India, and other nations to become contributors. But developing countries were of this very strong and very clear opinion that it should be the developed countries that should be the contributors. In terms of loss and damage, we know that the loss and damage fund was established. It was then operationalized. The discussions at Bonn were largely surrounding the financing bit of it. We have the fund, we have some little money in the fund as well, but how is it the countries can access that money? So those operation modalities were something that were being discussed. And lastly, in terms of global stocktake, there were some recommendations that came out of the global stocktake outcome that we discussed, but how do we implement those were being discussed, but did not have any conclusive recommendations. So if we talk about the expectations from the COP29, one of the key expectations definitely would be defining the new quantified climate finance goal. And this would be the key objective this year. And this year's COP is also being called the Finance COP. So this is one of the key targets. The second would be to actually mobilize a sufficient amount of money under the loss damage fund. Currently, we stand at around 700 million. But the demand and our ask is, and the need majorly is in billions and trillions. So we would hope that the COP29 can create a momentum for higher amount and pledges under the loss damage fund. And the third, under the GST, one of the expectations is also to basically highlight some of the recommendations that can be used to support the implementation of the GST outcomes, and enhancement the NDC. So NDCs is basically the emission reduction targets. So how is it that the countries can enhance and what kind of support could be provided? There are multiple other expectations of COP29, such as finalization of the Article 6, the submission of the first binding transparency reports. But these are fairly technical, so I've not deep dived into it a lot. But these are broadly what the expectations look like. So I'll just quickly end with this slide, and I just want to leave this as a food of thought for all of you. So this kind of sums up what some people said that COP28 looked like. And over here, we see that COP28 is being called a shopping mall. We saw that it was one of the biggest COPs. So the larger narrative over here was that while it was one of the biggest COP gatherings, but the per capita impact that it had was very minimal. So we hope that it was more of an experience it was more of an experience of discussing issues rather than coming up with very concrete action and recommendations. And we hope that the future COPs in the upcoming COP, especially the COP29, can fill this accountability gap and really ensure that there's action that is true to the needs and requirements of the current nations. So, I mean, that's all from my side, but happy to answer any questions or any questions or feedback that you may have.
Hi, thank you so much, Jhalak, for the deep dive into all the major negotiation process, the agreements, and the technicalities of it, whether it was binding or not, what was the conclusive decision of them. I have noted down a lot of questions, but I'll just summarize and kind of ask alternatively to you, Vikrant and Jhalak. I'll maybe start off with Vikrant. There's Kaf, who asks you about your journey and your key involvement in the whole negotiations, policy, advocacy, both in the national as well as international level. So if you could just maybe give a brief about that.
Thank you so much. Maybe you can start following me on LinkedIn to learn more. But yeah, uh, after 2019, December, I started learning more in context of climate change and try to involve myself more on discussion around Rio conventions. I started following what happens around the discussion on land, food, agriculture, and so. And this is what kind of interested me. And there it came UNFCCC process. And 27 was my first COP. And before COP 27, just I kind of had a WhatsApp group where I invited people from Asia Pacific to join in. And there was around 200 people who joined in who wanted to attend the COP 27. And during the COP 27, I just cross checked that how many people were there at the present. People, as in the youth below 35. There was 7 people out of 200 people. It struck me a lot. And I said that, okay, this is very alarming. A lot of discussion that is happening is about us and we are not taking part in. What can we do is for that? Last year, I started a platform called Asian Youth Empowerment. And this platform has uh, engage, empower, and build capacity for more than 500 youth. And also, we mobilize party batch for more than 10 party batch. And you can understand how important and how crucial one to have a party batch is. So we have more than 10 party batch, and they were all super uh, incredible people from different part of South Asia, and they were there. And right now, I have been working on building more engagement for policy-based advocacy. That is one of my target. I wanted to increase more advocacy in terms of policy, and this is where how we can bring more changes and big impact. This is there, and this is all the presentation that we have heard from me or Jhalak, there is a very technical understanding, and one has to has an understanding of these technical. So right now I'm working on these to provide more capacity building for youth across different spectrums and so. And yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn and we can have more chat on it.
Okay, great. I'll move on to Jhalak for the second question. Jhalak, we have multiple questions on GST. Maybe if you could break it down, I mean, break the jargon down, because a lot might not be very, kind of. I mean, we have a lot of youth audience, so maybe they're listening GST or global stock trade for the first time. If you could break it down to a layman's language, maybe if possible. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So basically, global stocktake is a review process that was established under the Paris Agreement. The idea for this global stocktake process was to review the collective progress of the countries. And over here, so there are review processes that are happening under the UNFCCC as well that look at the individual country actions. But under global stocktake, what we were doing is that collectively, how are all countries performing towards the goals of the Paris Agreement, which is to limit the temperature rise for 2 degrees. This was a big process. This was a 2-year long process. And the idea here was to see that, okay, how is it that we are lagging behind? What are those things that we need to improve on? And how is it that this can be made more inclusive and participatory? So this is where different stakeholders, such as, like I mentioned earlier, different communities, different observer organization, indigenous groups came in and shared their experiences on what is it that can be introduced under a global stock take. So in short, basically, I have covered the technicality bit of it. It was basically a review process on where we are in terms of the Paris Agreement goals. In simple, this is what like global stock take is. Stock take basically is a review of like where we are in terms of we are heading. So that was a global stock take for all the countries.
Okay. Yeah. Moving on to again Vikrant, there's a question on how the youth can be involved in not just the climate agreements or negotiation process, but also, I mean, raise their voices, and as well as how can they actually work on ground and take concrete climate actions.
I think that's a very good question. Following to bottom to top of sure what is all this discussion that happens around the global uh, level. This also has to uh, came back when you are coming back to your country and you also wanted to improve these changes in the ground also. Uh, how you can take part in globally, that I have already shared how you can take part in all the national focal point observer IGO, everyone list is already there in the UNFCCC website. You can simply go to the UNFCCC website, reach them out, write them an email, show them your interest, what you have been doing, and how you can take part in the process, and how you can support these observer. At the same time, these observer also look to provide opportunity to these youth. So that is the simplest way you can do, reaching out these people, and you can find all the details on the UNFCCC website, including their phone number and the email. How you can take part on the ground? There has been multiple initiative that has been going around. You can take part from different observer that has been observer to UNFCCC organization that are in India, such as IYCN is there, Climate Reality Project are there. You can join the hands with them, start implementing your ideas, have a call with them, share your thoughts that what you have been doing, what you have been learning, where you are a student, how you can implement these solution. So there have been multiple ways you can take part in, and there has been a lot of grants also right now. And one of the grant, if I may share, is it's ending tomorrow, is National Youth Climate Consortium, one of the project by UNICEF UA, and there will be around 1 lakh or something of grant that you will be given, and you can implement one of the climate project in your local. So yeah, there has been couple of more grants that you can also tap into it, and you just have to have a will. I started with zero, nothing, and you just have to have a will that you want to do something for the people and for the next generation, and you will find a way.
I move on to Jhalak once again. You took us through COP28 and what lies ahead of COP29. If you maybe can state some, uh, like, like what is India's stand for COP29? If I can rephrase it as simple as that, what is India's
Yeah.
stand?
So, I mean, India's stance is largely basically what the larger developing countries are saying at the moment. One of the stances that I highlighted was that in terms of financing, it says that in India and other developing countries should not be the contributors for these finance. And this basic aspect is this why they basically says is grounded in the principle of historical responsibility. India is a developing country. India is growing. There are many developmental needs. So we should actually be the recipients of such finance rather than being the contributors of this. And this is for finance for everything, be it in terms of loss and damage, be in terms of overall climate finance, be in terms of mitigation and just transition. In terms of, I mean, that is what the stance is majorly like. It has also highlighted the kind of money that it would require. India has highlighted approximately 1 trillion per year that would be required for its climate priorities. So yeah, I think majorly in terms of its stance, it says that it goes with developing country. It basically represents its stance as a developing country bloc. And for COP29, it has not officially come out with a statement yet, but we are expecting expecting the stance to be on similar lines as it was last year. And they've also focused, I mean, there was like a particular stance that came out for COP28, but for 29, I mean, these are largely things since it's a finance COP as well. Yeah.
Vikrant, moving on to you once again, if you could shed some light on what led to the first conference regarding climate change, and was it organized by the WMO? What promoted it, and is it the end of industrialization period? Your views on that?
Yeah, it was organized by WMO. Again, I have already shared what is WMO, but there was several facts that let this happen. And by 1917, definitely end of the industrialization, there was indicating that human activities has been affecting uh, and influencing the Earth's climate. It was one of the region, and then further also there were ongoing environmental movements from 1960 to 1970. There was huge movement, and there is a book called Silent Spring. I'm not sure if you have read it or not. Have a look. It has a lot of more detail in it. And the Earth Day was uh, first Earth Day took in 1970, where millions of people worldwide came together to work on protecting environment and further raise on public awareness on these issues. So yeah, there were couple of events that came together, and yeah, it was later hosted in Geneva.
Yeah.
And yeah, let me just type again. It's a Silent Spring 1962, one of the most important environment awareness during 1962, if I'm not wrong.
Okay. Yeah. Moving on back to Jhalak. Why 2 degrees Celsius? The big question. And how do we come to this, that the 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius? How are these numbers kind of come upon and agreed upon?
Yeah, so actually, these are numbers that came from the scientific bodies, and this is a scientific body which is the IPCC, that Vikrant also spoke about. So there were two numbers that were given, and this is basically calculated keeping in mind the carbon budget. Now, carbon budget, that is the carbon budget is a specific amount of space that is given for the countries that can be used to emit. So based on that, I'm not aware of the scientific way how it is done and like what were the models that were used, but this was basically grounded in like those scientific reality, and then through those modeling and through those scientific pathways is how the scientists came up to the 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees. And now why there is an explicit focus on 1.5 is because of the reducing carbon budget, and the if you look at the degrees at which the warming is increasing, we are closer to like 1.5 than 2, so hence explicit focus on 1.5.
Just to add, if you want to learn more of how this came, the degree, you can also go through the IPCC synthesis report, fifth, which was launched before the Paris Agreement in 2014.
Coming back to you, Vikrant, Dimple Behel asks, um, has the UNFCCC been set up based on the suggestions of Sweden on the idea of the UN conference in 1972 at Stockholm?
Uh, I'm not sure. Did I get it wrong? What exactly the setup of UNFCCC, or like?
Yes, the setup. She asks about the setup of UNFCCC.
Yeah, I think it was not by a day or a year where it came that we want UNFCCC. As I have already shared in the beginning of the presentation, I hope I can check with my team and share the presentation later. But yeah, starting with the 1979, 1988, when IPCC formed, and then first assessment report come in 1990, and then further, the first intergovernmental negotiation committee was set up in 1991, and further the Rio summit took place in 1992, where it was not only the discussion of the climate, but also there was the discussion on other issues that was challenging. So there it came three sister constituency, UNFCCC, UNCCD, and then UNCBT. So these were all together, and it was not one movement that okay, now we want UNFCCC. It was a parallel of all incident from the last 6-7 years, not the 7 years, but almost more than 10 years from the first conference that took place in 1979, and it happens actually in 1994. So you can imagine the time span.
Sorry, I guess we are running a bit beyond the expected time, but I'll just wrap it up with last one question directed to Jhalak. If you could maybe shed some light on the current scenario with tech transfer between the different parties, or the countries in general, and also the tech inclusion in context to the UNFCCC climate negotiations and
Sorry,
everything.
what inclusion? I didn't.
The technology
You said
transfer and technology
some
inclusion.
inclusion, right? Tech inclusion, you're saying, right?
Technology, yes,
Yeah,
technology,
okay.
tech transfer
So
and
I'm actually not an expert on technology transfer. There are like multiple agenda items, and this is one of the agenda items I don't very closely follow. So I won't be able to give a very clear view on this. So I mean, in terms of tech transfer, it happens under the negotiation process. There is an agenda item, technology transfer and inclusion. Countries come up with their technological assessment plans in which they highlighted what kind of technologies that they require and for what actions. There is a technology needs assessment also that is done, based on which they highlight, okay, that these are the needs, and based on this, depending on what kind of technology is available, at what in which countries, there are like bilateral, there are like multilateral transfer that happen, and this technology could be in the form, for example, early warning. So there are like multiple technology transfer that are happening outside of the negotiation process as well. So I mean, that's my limited understanding of that, but I won't be able to give like very clear understanding on the tech transfer bit. Yeah, but happy to get back on that.
okay. I guess we will wrap it up here today. I mean, I know there's multiple and thousands of questions that are flooding in the chat box and the question answer box, but I think we'll just keep it till here today. And we have other thematic sessions that are also lined up throughout the month of July as well as August. So please stay tuned. And a lot of questions are also directed to other different thematics which I didn't take up like for today, but I just want also any closing remarks from Jhalak and Vikrant in under 60 seconds, like quick closing remarks, and how can maybe instigate the youth to take actions in the climate space. Your final thoughts on it. Vikrant, I start with you. 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Okay. Uh, Start looking for what is happening and start with one of the topics. There has been multiple topics that are under triple C and other different agenda. Choose one of the niche area and try to follow it and try to learn what is happening around it, and with that try to also communicate with the expert. If you are looking around, use the social media. That's one of the easiest way. Try to connect them with the people, those who are on LinkedIn, what they have been doing, and whatever you learn also try to pass to other people, so that at the same time they don't face those difficulties. So it's should be a chain reaction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vikrant. I pass it on to Jhalak. Your
Yeah.
60 seconds starts.
Yes. Thanks, Achintya. So I think there are multiple ways in which youth can actually be involved. And like Vikrant also mentioned, I think pick up on that one niche area of try to understand the technicality and technicality of it. We have a lot of people that I mean, the focus of your advocacy should be based on more evidence-based stuff. While we have like multiple things that are going on, so focusing on a very advocacy approach is something I would recommend, and also looking at also bringing some kind of technical reality to it is important. There are multiple processes for the youth also that is happening. There's a youth stock take that happened basically last year as well. This was the first global stock take, and along with that, the youth stock take on the engagement of how the youth has been involved in different ways and how can we enhancing engagement is also there. Vikrant also mentioned about this NYCC, which is a National Youth Climate Consortium. That's another way in which how we can empower the grassroots leaders. There are multiple negotiating programs which give these youth the ability to participate in these negotiations and truly ensure that understand what it feels like and what kind of decisions are made, how those decisions are made, and what are those key targeted things that we're looking at. So there are multiple ways and through which the youth can engage. And I think, yeah, I think become a leader in one thing and like keep learning side things on the side. Yeah.
I again thank you so very much, Jhalak and Vikrant, for the really deep dive into COP. And I know it's kind of very technical, but I think all of the participants really enjoyed and learned a lot about the basics of COP, which really builds the base for going into hardcore negotiations following different thematics under the UNFCCC processes. So again, I thank you so very much for your time, and really looking forward to work with you all in the coming stages of this program once again. Thank you so much. I'll also request Mr. Bhavesh to, maybe just give food for thought to all the participants, and then I would, take all the participants through the questions for assignments and attendance at the later stages after Bhavesh's comment. Bhavesh, any questions or any thoughts?
Indeed, insightful. Many things have been spoken of, which probably we were not aware of, and see the kind of prudence that our uh, young minds have brought in out here. Thank you so very much, Vikrant, and thank you so very much, Jhalak. At the same time, I'll also appreciate the two-way communication that was happening from the audience side as well. They have been very participating, and probably we missed out yesterday. There are people behind the scenes who have been managing the show. We are visible faces, but there are many visible faces from Climate Reality, from IYCN, from our partner network who have been doing the show from behind the curtains. So we thank all of them. Individual name can't be taken, but you know them all. So thank you so very much, people. Over to you, Achintya.
Yeah. Coming on to the attendance and questions regarding the tasks. So tomorrow we'll be floating a Google form wherein we will be asking for the attendance, the suggestions and feedbacks for this session one, based on the basics of COP. Then we'll be giving some questions related to today's session. Those would be mostly around today's session, and in the form of MCQs. And finally, you can expect a small question wherein you can, a space where you can maybe put up your questions that were directed to this session. Please do not include any other thematic areas. Try not to just focus on this thematic sessions and the presentations that were discussed in today's session. So but we really thank all the participants for today's presence on a Sunday evening. I understand that there are a lot of engagements and other plans, but I once again thank everyone for joining in today, and we will share the Google form tomorrow over email as well as on the WhatsApp chat box. I also request everyone to join in the WhatsApp chat group that we have created. We are also trying to create a parallel group either on WhatsApp or Telegram for informal communications and networking opportunities that would be free for everyone to join in. And although it is not official, but you can always feel free to network and discuss any topics around that. And I guess that's it for today. And anything that I have missed, maybe Bhaveshji, or if you want to mention anything else.
Good to go, Achintya. Yeah, we can.
Okay. I thank you once again, Jhalak and Vikrant, especially for joining in and helping us, with the basics of COP, taking us all through the basics of COP. And again, all thank you to all the participants for joining in and being such an active, and patient listener, and also being participative in the question answer sessions and small MCQs that we had incorporated in the presentations itself. Thank you, and have a good day ahead. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.